I'd like to start this off with an apology for the somewhat strange sounding audio, as I am pretty sure it sounds like I'm going through a wind tunnel at this moment. It is currently 104 degrees outside, so keeping the AC on for my own sanity. So, like I covered in my last video, similar to how Cyberrock Opinions made a video series about how he would redesign the classes in 5th edition if he were to have his way with the classes instead of Wizards of the Coast, I would like to do something similar, except go into detail that how I would do it for my current system as it has been laid out in my previous video. So the first one I would like to tackle, I'm going to go a little bit out of order here, because as opposed to starting with the Artificer, as the alphabetical order would suggest, I'm going to start with the books that I'm the most familiar with, being the Player's Handbook, and then I'll go on to the Artificer last, as to keep not consistency, but more my knowledge of the classes rather than anything else. So we're going to start with the Barbarian. I'm actually currently reworking the Barbarian, and it's actually the third iteration of the Barbarian that I have made, as the first iteration was quite literally how I would describe it is Barbarian Plus. It was just what Champion Fighter is to the Fighter. It was just a small improvement to the Barbarian. And then Barbarian version 2 was assuming that you were going to be using Rage in the similar way that you're going to, where you enter a range and it lasts until the end of combat, and you can use Rage powers, using Rage points, yada yada yada. However, I have since changed that. So here's how I'm going to redesign the Barbarian. Firstly, all armor class boosts, such as unarmored defense, are going to be based on the primary stat of the class. So for Barbarian, that is obviously Constitution or Strength. You get to pick. It's either Strength or Constitution, whichever one you want. I might make it one. That is yet to be solidified, but as of right now, it's either Strength or Constitution instead of Dexterity. All classes start with 10 AC baseline, as most editions do. They also get bonus critical hit chance, and they can use their Strength modifier on ranged, specifically thrown weapon attacks. They also get Rage, or Fury in this case, where whenever combat starts, they enter a rage, and while in rage, they generate Fury. And while in this state, Fury, you can use this Fury to use certain rage powers. And each rage power has a baseline cost, and they have an enhancement that either requires you to spend more rage points equal to the initial cost, or they have a mechanic where if you spend a certain number of additional rage points, you get a benefit for each additional rage point. I keep saying rage, but it's Fury, but you get the idea. And how it works is that while out of combat, you have an amount of Fury equal to your Fury maximum, which I believe starts at 2 and goes up to 10, and that is your Fury maximum. So that is how much Fury you can spend on a single rage power at a time. You can use more than one rage power at any point, but the amount of Fury you can spend on a rage power is determined by your Fury maximum. So if you have a power that allows you to expend 1 Fury to do an ability, and your Fury maximum is 3, you can probably spend upwards of 2 additional Fury to empower that, or you can use those 2 additional Fury to do whatever you want. Now, in combat, you can have an amount of fury equal to your barbarian level. However, once combat ends or you take a short rest, your fury resets to your fury maximum. And every time you take damage and every time you deal damage, you generate 1 fury. And every time you critically strike a creature or a creature critically strikes against you, you gain 2 fury. Now, the Barbarian has these powers, like I mentioned before. But we're going to move past that for a second, and we're going to go into the basic abilities. So, instead of extra attack at level 5, they get something similar to the Monk's Ki-empowered strikes, where they get rage-fueled strikes. Where instead of their basic attacks, which is you just doing your normal weapon damage plus your strength modifier, instead of just doing 1, they get to do twice that amount of damage. And then as they level up, they get to do 3 times and up to 4 times damage on a single weapon strike. And they can only do 2 weapon strikes as per the ability at 2nd level, which allows them to, whenever they use the attack action to make a basic attack, they can make 2 basic attacks instead of 1. And the reason for this is because, based on the math that I was able to do using my monster math for my system, the Barbarian, with this ability at 2nd level, would be equal to dealing enough damage to kill a boss monster of their level in 3 rounds, which is exactly where I wanted them to be. But that's not taking into account any of the powers that they get to use, any boosts when it comes to magic items. That's just their baseline features. And then as they get further along their rage, they become immune to certain conditions that would normally end their rage. They don't have their resistance anymore, but they can move up to twice their speed at 5th level. So they literally just get double movement speed. I did the Cybrox version of the HP scaling, where anytime they gain HP at 2nd level and beyond, they get double the amount. And similar things. Then we get to the rage powers. So the rage powers work off of a system of Barbarian level. So if you're a level 1 Barbarian, you can have 2 at-will Barbarian powers, and you can have 2 additional rage powers from the list of the baseline rage powers. And on top of that, each subclass that you get to pick at 1st level gets an at-will power for free. So the Frenzy Barbarian, or the Berserker Barbarian, gets Frenzy, which is an at-will power. The Totem Warrior gets their Totem Spirit power. Storm Herald gets their Storm Aura, etc., etc. And they don't count against the number of at-wills you can know. So each Barbarian gets essentially 3 rage powers, 3 at-wills, but one of them is tied to their subclass. And that's because each subclass has its own distinct playstyle, where the Ancestral Guardian is a debuffer and slight crowd controller. The Berserker is pure raw damage. The Beast Barbarian is a summoner class, so it has a companion, much like the Beastmaster. And the Storm Herald is an area of effect. Depends on which aura you choose, but it's primarily damage or slight sustain. And the totem is going to be what it is now, where it's going to be hammered in as the primary defensive subclass, where if you want even more ability to tank for your team, this is the one you pick. Each rage power that you get from a subclass It depends on its activation, but most of them are whenever you enter a rage, or whenever combat starts, whenever you roll initiative, you can use this rage power for free, and it lasts until the combat ends. But moving on, you also get your subclass features at 3rd, 6th, 10th, 14th, and 18th level, and that's standard across all classes. And finally, we're going to get to the meat and potatoes, the steak and butter, the spaghetti and meatballs of the class, the rage powers. Now, they're broken into levels, where there's at-wills, and then there's level 1 powers, which are slightly more powerful than at-wills, but not by much. And they each cost 1 rage point, and they have an enhancement that costs an additional rage point. I keep saying rage point. That's the old version. Each of them costs 1 fury, and they have a fury enhancement. So if you want to, you can use, at level 1, either 2 rage powers, or 1 rage power with an enhancement. But since anytime you hit, you generate a fury, or anytime you deal damage, you generate a fury, and anytime you take damage, you generate fury, that means you're really incentivized to use the fury on enhancements since you get them so quickly. At-wills will cost nothing, and each at-will will gain an additional effect or an enhancement on the effect at 6th, at 3rd, 6th, 10th, 14th, and 18th levels. Or maybe it's just 6th, 10th, 14th, and 18th levels. It was one of the two, I can't remember off the top of my head. But they level up like cantrips. And the level 1s, they stay at the same level, but a lot of them are going to just be, if you spend 1 rage point, you get a benefit, but the more rage points you spend, the bigger the benefit you get. Then there's level 2 rage powers, and then after that, you jump to level 5 rage powers, and that's because you gain 1 rage power every level. So you get 2 at-wills at the start, 2 additional rage powers for a total of 4, and you get your rage at-will power from your subclass at level 1. And then once you reach 2nd level, you can get an additional rage power, where you can either choose to get a more powerful level 2, or you can get a less powerful level 1 that might have certain niche uses. And then once you reach level 3, you can choose either a 2nd or a 1st, and then 4th, a 2nd or a 1st. And then once you reach level 5, you have access to the 5th level. And so you're never really running out of options, you just get to swap them out every once in a while. Which is another thing that is different about my rage powers. Instead of just being stuck with whatever you get, whenever you choose a rage power and you take a short rest, you can change 1 rage power including at-wills, with any other rage power that you wish. So if you so wanted to, you could forego all at-wills and go for all leveled ones, or you can forego a few of your leveled ones and get a few more at-wills. Which is possible, but you're more incentivized to get higher level at-wills. And whenever you take a long rest, you essentially get to respec all of your rage powers as you see fit. So, if you take a short rest and you realize that the dungeon that you're currently in, a lot of the creatures are immune to fear, and you picked one that caused an area of effect, frighten effect, then you could just get rid of it and choose a different one. And then by the time you reach the end, you realize what you're fighting as a player, and so you decide to respec all of your rage powers into dealing with that threat. I think this creates a lot of diversity in gameplay, as it is very similar to how spellcasters like the cleric and the druid do it, where they know all of their rage powers, they just have to prepare or they know all of their spells, but they need to prepare certain spells. The barbarian's the same way. they technically know all of their rage powers in mechanics, but they need to prepare them. But in lore, it's more of you're changing your fighting style to match what you're trying to do. You have access to all of your rage powers as a character in the universe, but you have to determine what is the most valuable to use at that moment. And if you don't have the wherewithal to prepare for a situation where another rage power would be very useful, then you're just out of luck. And there's going to be Paragon Paths, Epic Destinies, and Legendary Journeys that you could go on, which are essentially my version of those, of the Paragon Paths and Epic Destinies from 4th edition. There's not going to be very many. I think to start, I'm going to have 2 of each, and then work my way up to more. And for the Barbarian, I'm thinking that for each one, there's going to be 2 primary ways of playing. There's the melee tanky class, and then there's the less tanky, there's going to be the tanking, less damage portion that is garnered towards the melee playstyle, and then there's the less tanky but more damage ranged option for those who want to use thrown weapons. And they just get better as you get up. But that's how I'm redesigning the Barbarian. Tune in next time when I tell you how I'm going to redesign the Bard.